like to welcome everyone this evening for coming to our League of Women Voters of Marion and Polk County sponsored School Bond Measure Forum. League of Women Voters is a political, nonpartisan voter education organization serving our communities with both candidates and issues, although we do not support the candidates. Please visit our websites for all of your voter needs, and there are many for you to see, so I hope that you will seek them out. This includes a video voter's guide for candidates, which locally addresses Ward 4, Ward 8, and our municipal judges. It also includes statewide candidates, so it's a very good way to get acquainted. We also have voter's guides, both in paper form that you will find in many locations and distributed through the communities, and online as well through voter resources and vote411.org. And these are published in standard and in large print and in Spanish for your use and guidance. Election Day is May 15th, and ballots have gone out this week and are due no later than 8 p.m. on May 15th. Remember, postmarks don't count. Remember also, we encourage you to think before you ink. So be a well-informed voter. I would like to also thank CCTV for recording this program, which will be rebroadcast. You can check their website for time and date. Now, let's introduce our presenters. We have with us this afternoon and early evening Nancy McMorris-Addix, and she is a certified nurse midwife with the Legacy Silverton system. And she served our community on the Salem Keizer School Board from 2009 until recently in July 2017. She is an advocate for Yes for Schools and participation in our community. Also with us is Michael Wolf, Chief Operating Officer of Salem Keizer Schools since 2009. The questions that you pose this evening will be written on cards, and I will share them with our presenters. So please just raise your hand to receive a card and a pencil, and we will have a person collect those for later on in our program. So at this time, I would like to share our School Bond Forum with our two presenters. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you. I'm going to present a brief presentation of the bond that I believe is really fact-based and not partisan. I am partisan on this, but I will try to stay nonpartisan in my presentation. The presentation is going to talk about the package, a brief overview of how the bond package was developed, what the general obligation bond will do to tax rates, what the bond history is in Salem Keizer, and then just a brief information about voting. You're past the register to vote date, and ballots are mailed, just like Deanie said. So the bond package is a $619.7 million bond package. It's a 20-year bond that is a levy rate of $1.24 in estimated property tax per thousand of assessed value. So in Salem Keizer, the average home is about $250,000. That makes a rate of 86 cents a day, or about $25.50 a month. This is a tax increase as well. So the final bond package has a variety of things in it. So Salem Keizer is enormously overcrowded already, with a projection to grow. We're adding about 300 students a year. So when we're already overcrowded, with growth projected, we are going from overcrowded to more overcrowded to more overcrowded. So about 442 million of the bond package is adding space. So we're adding 170 classrooms throughout the district. We're replacing old, worn-out portables that cost us a lot of money to keep up. We're doing a significant addition on all high schools that will build our high schools up to hold 2,200 students. Our current high school populations are running around 2,000 students, though the high schools were all built for somewhere between 1,600 and 1,800 students. So we already have an overcrowding issue, and we're going to add space so that those students have actually enough space. In those additions at the high schools, we're going to add career technical spaces. Some of those will be new programs. Some of those will be additional space for old programs so that more students will be able to be served by those programs. A lot of people think that all of our career technical education happens at the CTEC Center. So we have currently 6 programs at the Career Technical Center, which is out on Portland Road, with a plan to add 2 additional programs next year. We have 38 programs in our existing high schools already. So the majority of our career technical education happens in our existing high schools. 76.7 million of that bond package is for future maintenance. So just like when you own a home and you put a roof on and they say it's a 20-year roof, you need to know that in 20 years you need to be thinking about how much it's going to cost you to replace your roof. So we know that in the course of this bond, some of those things will come up. That's future maintenance. That's not deferred maintenance. 67 million is for seismic safety. So the district went through with engineers, did a full assessment of the district needs, looked at all the different structures, and it was interesting to me to learn as a school board member that when you look at a school building, that to me is a structure, but each of our buildings is made up of a collection of structures, and each one of those structures were assessed for their seismic safety. And we will be, shoring up buildings, doing seismic retrofitting in the very high-risk structures in the district. If we were to go through and make every school as safe as every parent would want every aspect of every school to be, it would probably be in the billions of dollars just for the seismic upgrades without doing any other work. So in addition, 21 million will be for other safety and security upgrades. So there'll be keyless entries that are state-of-the-art, giving the district the ability to lock down specific parts of schools, specific entrances from remotely. It will move front offices so that, many of our schools were built at a time when nobody thought it was important that somebody should be able to see who's walking through the front door. And that's not the case anymore. So moving front offices so they have better line of sight on the front door. And finally, a small piece, 12.7 for technology upgrades and students with disability access issues as well. So to get to this place where we have decided what will be in this bond, the district is required by the state to do a long-term facilities plan. So that started in 2015. They went through all building by building by building, looked at all the needs, the structural needs, the educational needs. They looked at population studies from Portland State University's Population Center to look at where growth was projected to be. And that all went together in a recommendation to the school board of what the needs were. The school board then asked the district to put together a facilities task force. They looked at the long-range plan. They met weekly and did a ton of work with a bunch of citizens who evaluated all that work. And came back to the school board with a recommendation of a $766 million bond that was deemed that there was $766 million in need for the district. So the school board then asked the district to go to the community and do a poll, like what does the community think about this? Are they willing to bear this kind of cost? What do they think about our schools? Do they believe that we're overcrowded? All of that kind of thing went into the polling. The polling came back and said a number of things. One, interestingly, in the first time any of us can remember, the community said, we support our schools. We will pay more to support our schools. But they did say 766 was just too much, too big of a bond. So the school board took the information, said to the district, sharpen your pencils, see if you can come back with a bit smaller number. The community poll showed the sweet spot that the community was willing to accept was an increase in property taxes from $1.50 to $2.50. So then the district being able to keep it down to $1.24 was below that spot. So felt good about that. So the district then came back with a recommendation of $619.2 million. And just before I went off the school board took a vote to move forward with that. Then in the fall, the district held listening sessions at all of our comprehensive high schools, and all of the feeder schools were invited into that. They looked at what the recommendations for their buildings were. All of that information was put together. Of course, when you get people together to talk about what the needs are, more needs came forward. So about another $60 million worth of needs were identified from those processes. Some of those things were incorporated, which brought us back up again. And the new school board said to the district, Mike, sharpen those pencils again. And so they did that. So there were things initially in the bond package that were taken out. And there were things in the initial bond package that were just altered. So in my opinion, they did some really smart work. Like, we know that the cost of building is going up by about 6% a year. So by moving the most expensive projects to the first years, we saved a considerable amount of money. And I thought that was somebody's great thinking, probably Mike's. In addition, there was a transportation center. I don't know if you've ever been to Hawthorne and D Street where that little lot is. Our buses drive something like the circumference of the earth a week. Is that accurate?
I'd almost like to say a day, but that seems like a lot.
It does. Either a day or a week. They drive a lot. And we have a lot of buses, and we have this little property that is where we do all of our mechanical repairs and that kind of thing. And a lot of years ago, before I was on the school board bought some property out on Gaffin Road to do a new transportation center that we've never been able to afford. So that was hoped to be in this bond, and it didn't make the cut. There was also a recommendation to consolidate all of our administration into one building because we've got pieces of it all over town, and that didn't make the cut. In addition, the other kind of major thing that didn't happen is Auburn Elementary is a school that was built for about 350 students and has been just under or just over 700 students in the last few years. None of the infrastructure in the school, the cafeteria, the gymnasium, the library, have been updated to meet that need. So there was hope to build them a new school and repurpose the old school into early childhood center, and the ability to procure land to do that at a cost that was reasonable didn't happen. So Auburn Elementary will be getting a significant addition to meet the needs of the student population, but not getting a whole new school. So all of those things saved money. The school board also had some other reports, like a seismic report, a special education external audit, that whole issue about land acquisition and what that process was, were also brought to the school board. So that total of another $60 million was discussed, and then work to bring that number back down to that $619 million. So in the bond, there will be 29 major capital construction projects. 17 elementary schools will be getting classrooms, cafeterias, either additions, or we have elementary schools without cafeterias. So in the 80s, schools were built kind of in pods where there was just never a cafeteria. So kids eat in their rooms, sit at their desks to eat, creates, mess for those classrooms, and really inhibits the ability for kids to get out of their classrooms and have social time and those kinds of things. In addition, we have new requirements for PE at all levels, and so adding gym space. If you have a school with way too many children for your gym space and you stick them all into the gym and all they can do is go like this, that's not exactly physical education. So adding gym spaces so that kids can actually move around in PE is important. The 6 middle schools will get increases in classrooms. All middle schools will be getting science lab classrooms. We currently have a situation where our middle school kids in 6th and 7th grade are getting a half year of science, not because anyone thinks that that's what's good for middle school kids, but because we don't have space in our middle schools for them to have a full year of science. So we're adding science classrooms, cafeterias, cafeteria expansions. The map of Waldo Middle School is just shocking when you look at the size of Waldo Middle School and the configuration of their current cafeteria. It looks like just a little hallway with tables in it. It's just way too small, and it's going to be more than doubled to be able to sit those students. When you have to run multiple lunch periods, it impacts the education day. So in schools that are very, very overcrowded, you have schools that were running 5 to 7 lunches. So you think about an elementary school that's running 7 lunches. Some kids have lunch within about an hour of arriving at school, and other kids have lunch at nearly the end of the day. And for an elementary child, either extreme is really difficult in terms of maintaining their energy level and all of that. The middle schools talk about running 3 and 4 lunches. You have classes that start and then get interrupted to have a lunch and then go back to the same class, versus if you just you could house all your kids in 2 lunches. Kids could have a class and then go to lunch, or have lunch and then a full class, and you wouldn't lose so much instruction time with having to regather kids. So I said cafeterias and multipurpose rooms. Again, that's gym space as well in the middle schools. The 6 comprehensive high schools will be getting classrooms, special education. One of the things that came out of the community meetings is that special education families feel really strongly that they would like their kids to go to their local schools and not be shipped to another school. The kids want to graduate with their siblings and graduate with their neighborhood kids. So there'll be special ed additions at all high schools. I've talked about the career technical education classrooms. We're adding gymnasiums at high schools, libraries, auditoriums, parking. Not at all high schools, but individually. Certain high schools will be getting an auditorium, others will be getting library space, others gymnasiums. But very big projects. It will be a 5-year process of building starting this summer of 2019. I think I talked about seismic. So another issue about the seismic, all of the new construction will be at a higher level of safety. So they will be built to reoccupancy standards rather than just standards that allow children to get out. So it means that in our community, we will have buildings that should stand through the Cascadia quake that will be spread all throughout our district that can be used for sheltering people or disaster staging and that kind of thing. Some schools will be getting music upgrades as well. I think I didn't talk about that. So storage of big instruments. The district says that they're surprised to find that some of the instruments are really large and they need big storage spaces for these big instruments. But I was a band parent, so I'm quite aware of how big instruments are. When we look at the bond and the impact on the community, the district has in the past done a good job of managing funds. The last bond was a $242 million bond. At the end of the time that the bond program was to end, all the projects were done on time and at or under budget, and there was money left. The district also has managed its bond purchasing and refinancing in a way that helps manage that cost. So in the last bond, the district was able to come to the school board and say, there's some additional funds still out there. What would you like to do? So the school board said, let's see what other needs there are. And so several schools got significant seismic upgrades with that money. McKinley Elementary in Englewood, I think, or McKinley in Richmond, or
Yeah,
all three of them.
Our four oldest are Century schools: Highlands, Richmond, Englewood, McKinley.
all got pretty significant seismic upgrades. So in this bond, as levy rates pay off, this is going to be an additional increase on the current amount. And as the 2008 bonds completely leave, this bond sale is going to fill in, so it's going to maintain a pretty steady rate at that $1.24 increase over the course of the bond program at about 20 years. I apologize. My computer doesn't connect to your PowerPoint, so if you wanted to see those slides, I can show you, but I can't put them up here. But we also know in the last bond that every dollar spent on the bond comes back into the community. The workers who come into town, if they're coming from out of town, buy hotel rooms. The workers who are working here go out to lunch on their lunch hour. They buy gas. Those dollars come back into the community. So the last bond every dollar turned about 6 times in the community. The economy in the time of that bond was significantly different than the community that we're in now. The economy we're in now, excuse me. So we expect that it may be closer to $3 per dollar to turn again. So that is a significant investment in the community. Have I left out big, important things?
I think so. Nice job.
So as Deanie said, you should be getting your ballot every day, any day now, and they need to be in by the 15th.
At this time, we'd like to collect any questions you have on your card, so if you just raise those up, you may have thought of a number of things, and we'll take a look at those questions and share them back and turn to our 2 guests to have all the answers, right?
That's right. That's why we brought Mike, because he really has all the answers.
Okay, and you can continue to just raise your hand if you have other questions that come up. If the bond measure passes, will portable classrooms disappear?
That's a great question. Mike? I know the answer, but...
Well, let's see if I say the right thing. The short answer is all of the old portable classrooms. We have 177 portable classrooms throughout the district. About 60% of them were designed for 20 years use, and they're between 20 and 36 years of age. So About 106 of the portable classrooms are old, and they will be replaced. We also, though, have 50-year portables that have 2 classrooms in each building with bathrooms between that are really good teaching and learning spaces, and we'll keep those as assets. Now, they may not be in the place that they need to be in the future, so we have a plan to move them around the district, but we'll continue to use some.
And Mike said the word replace. They will be replaced. They will be replaced with brick and mortar classrooms, not replaced with new portables that have a 20-year life. They will be brick and mortar classroom additions on our buildings.
Thank you. This question: how do I find out what's in it for me? In other words, how do I find out how it affects my local elementary, middle school, high school?
Great. Both on the district website, there's a button to push for bond, and there are school by school by school sheets that talk. There's a box that has the projection of growth for that particular school for 10, 15, and 20 years. In addition, there's a list of projects that will happen in that school. If you don't find it easily on the district website, it is also on the yesforsalemkeiserschools.com website, and they're listed both by alphabetically by school and also by feeder area. So if you like to look at your feeder area, like you live in the Sprague area and you want to click that, you see all the schools that feed Sprague are there. So it tell you exactly what's going to happen at those schools.
Thank you. Which schools are getting most of the seismic upgrade money, and what will be done, and what's the timeline on that?
Whoa, that's a hard question.
That's a good one. I don't know that I'd be able to give you a specific list of the schools that are getting most of the seismic work. I can tell you that any of the schools that are older than like 1976 will typically have more of the high-risk structures. And our largest projects are the 6 comprehensive high school additions, and so that's where we'll find a lot of clay tiles were used back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s as a way to, it was a fire retardant to move away from asbestos, but they're not very good seismically. So once we get in and start working on those buildings that were built in that era, that's where most of the high-risk structure, very high-risk structures are.
I think that those school-by-school sheets also tell you what year they were built. So if you look at the date that they were built, so the school's built in the 50s, well, really from the 60s back are going to be the ones that have the most issues.
Yep.
In terms of this work, is there a sequence or a priority of which work happens? Like, does the seismic work happen first, or does the additional building construction happen first? Is there a priority there?
Actually, it's more efficient to do a comprehensive construction project. So in other words, instead of, we're going to roll through the district and do the seismic work and then come back through to the same buildings and do the additions and then come back through and do other features. Each of the 29 projects, the capital construction projects, so we have 65 schools, so 29 have major capital construction projects. They're holistic. So when we're working at North, it's all of the work that North will get in the bond all at once.
Thank you. These next few questions address security measures, and I imagine as new construction and upgrades occur, and you mentioned a few with the relocation of the offices and view of site. So these questions address about security. And I think I'll share all of them, and then you can use which approach. What are current security measures, and how is that related to facilities? And are there security cameras in all the hallways at schools, and is that something that will be introduced in these upgrades? And are there any other specific items related to security in the upgrades?
Okay, I may need some help
Okay, sure.
with all the different aspects. So security is one of the primary features of the bond as well. And so some of our current security features, the electronic card access is really important because what that does is it removes keys just pulls keys out of use. And that's really important to us because we know that our facilities are really community facilities. They're gathering places. And over the years, through rentals, we've issued a lot of keys. Mm-hmm. Well, they're hard to keep track of. But when you have card access, you can electronically determine when you are allowed to come in. Your card will only work from 6 to 8 p.m. on Wednesday nights. That's it. That's totally different than a key that you may have given to someone else over the years, and we lose track of those things. So just by eliminating keys and moving to electronic card access, we've tightened up the security and the use of our buildings. But also, as you enter the buildings, our doors are always locked. And that's the new posture that we're moving into. And so it may be a slight inconvenience to push a buzzer, but that's kind of where we're going to be heading as a district, because it's really important to be able to maintain positive control of the access, the ingress and the egress, in and out of a building.
Maybe two areas would be the security cameras. Mm-hmm. What's that situation? And then related to access, are there changes in windows?
We'll have to talk a little bit more about what you mean by the changes in windows. But we do have cameras. We have surveillance each of our entrances. In the secondary schools, the middle and high schools, there are cameras in hallways, but not every hallway. So it's not like London where no matter where you go, you're on camera, because you can't just have a camera and not monitor it. That doesn't that just defeats the purpose of surveillance. And so it's surveillance for safety and security, not surveillance for supervision. And there's a big difference there. Now, as far as the windows, I'm curious as to what the question is.
With concern either with seismic or security, do windows need to be changed? Is there a reduction in windows? Are there new window substances put in?
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, that's a great question. So a couple of things that we do that help with seismic activity to strengthen a building is, let's say that this was a bank of windows in the back. And on that wall, that's a wall that if there was a shake, if we could strengthen that wall, would strengthen the building. So instead of replacing the entire bank of windows, we may just replace 2/3 of it and put a shear wall up to strengthen that part of the structure. So there's techniques that we can use by removing windows and adding shear walls that will strengthen the buildings. But as far as the materials, we're not looking at putting bulletproof glass or anything like that into the windows necessarily. Although there are some ballistic materials that we will consider in the front entrances, I think is probably a prudent thing to take a look at.
Related, still continuing with the security and the buzzer system into schools, how do you use this kind of system but keep an open, friendly attitude towards people wanting to come in, a welcoming attitude?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that we can peacefully coexist. I think it's really important to maintain the openness of a school without putting staff and students at risk. And so we live in a different world than we did 10, 15 years ago. And I think we all need to change our expectations a bit.
So you haven't noticed that with the system of the buzzer, anything that's...
So I visited a lot of schools, and I visited schools that, like, for example, McKinley Elementary, where you walk in and it's like walking into a split level house. You're in a stairwell that goes up and down, and the office is not right there. And so you have to buzz, and they just ask who it is if they don't know, and you tell who it is, and then they're very welcoming over the loudspeaker. And then when you walk into the office to check in, then they know who's there, and they're very welcoming. It has never felt to me like, going through security at the airport where you feel like you're a suspect all the way through, and it has not, in my opinion, felt like it's unwelcoming.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll get to the money part.
Okay.
And I'm sure you get this question also. How, the question says, how can I afford this on a fixed income with the recent police building levy passed, which will also increase my property tax bill this year? How do we combine these two? How
Yeah.
do we look at this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the one thing that I will say first is each of us have to make make our own determination as to whether or not we can afford an increase in any of our living costs, quite frankly. One of the benefits, though, of living in a growing community like the Salem Keizer community is it brings a certain vibrancy, right, quality of life. And with that growth comes infrastructure costs. And so all I can say is that your school district has been growing for decades, and we've run out of space. And we need more space, and we need more. We need to be able to enhance our program offerings because this investment is really in the future of our kids. And so, but it really comes down to what any individual can feel that they can actually afford, and we get that. And I wish that we didn't live in a system that put those burdens on our local populations. You know, I wish we were in a different environment where there was investments made at the state or federal level, but there just aren't. And so that's how these investments get funded.
This is the only way that we have in the state of Oregon to make investments in our schools in terms of building our schools. I would say also, as a person who has no children in the district, I view this as something that maintains my property value when the schools go down because we're not keeping them up or we're not addressing overcrowding. Then we become a less desirable community, and then our property values drop.
Well, and also, not everybody in the Salem Keizer Public School District lives within Salem city limits, so not everybody is hit with that police building.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay, the statement made for the recording is where our population lives is not equally impacting the various levies that occur. So you may be using Salem Keizer schools, but you may not be right in the city. So it's important to think about what the population outreach and how many people are served by this, and how many people use the buildings, how many people use the grounds, because the school grounds are parks. So there is a broader picture, I think, also.
I did learn at one of these sessions there was a representative, legislative representative there, who said that in Oregon we have a statute that for people living on fixed incomes who can't afford property tax increases, you have the ability to defer your property tax, and that at the point of sale of your property in the future, that property tax can be paid. So for people who, are in that situation of a fixed income and can't afford those increases, there is that option. And he pointed out that most county assessors' offices aren't wild about sharing that information, but it is true, and you can claim that if you want to talk with your assessor's office.
Could you remind us just once again about the cost per per day and per week to the general property owner, please?
So it's $1.24 per thousand, and in Salem Keizer, the average home is worth $250,000, and that is 86 cents a day, or $25.50 a month.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes.
I was wondering, whether the population, 300 students a year addition, is that leveling off because families are getting smaller? Or are we still getting income in growth from people moving in, or how is that looking?
The question is, what is the trend with student population growth, and has it leveled off?
No, it hasn't. We expect more coming at a faster pace. In fact, we're expecting about 1,000 more students in less than 5 years. And so that average of 300, that was over the past 5 years. And within that, we had 1 year of over 600 and 1 year of over 500 and 1 year of 100. And so what happens is, it's not, if it was 600 K-5 students in South Salem, we'd know where to put a new school. But it's 600 students over 65 schools K-12, and that's why we've handled that over the years, like every school district in the nation, with portables. But as Nancy said, you can only do that so long until you have overburdened the cafeterias and the gyms and all of that. And so we're at that point. In fact, there's something, kind of a stat that we use a lot, that says if we do nothing in less than 8 years, we won't have enough space for over 1,300 high schoolers. That's using all the old portables. If we take those out of the high school inventory, we won't have enough space for over 2,200 high schoolers in less than 8 years. If we do nothing in less than 5 years, McKay will be pushing 2,800 students. So we have an urgent need.
And it's mostly influx. The birth rate in the state of Oregon is down over what it's been. So it's a lot of people moving into our community. Cost of housing in Portland and the Portland metro area is pushing people down here to purchase homes because they're more affordable. We have Amazon coming in with a big processing, some kind of big something, Amazon. So a lot of workers. It's more, I think, growth of people moving in than it is a booming birth rate.
I'd like to introduce Cindy Burgess, our current League of Women Voter president, and she will make our closing remarks for this evening.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank our speakers, Nancy McMorris-Addix and Michael Wolf. It was very informative, and I hope that you all learned something, and I hope that you will go to Oregon Votes. Voter Resources
And Vote 411.
and Vote 411, vote411.org. And then you put in your zip code and you'll find all the races that apply to your area. What I wanted to say about the OregonVotes.gov is it's too late to register to vote, but if you have moved, you can still go to your county clerk's office and tell them you've moved and get a ballot. Thank you very much for attending and for listening, and we hope to see you at our next event, which will probably be in the fall around the elections then. Thank you.